characterize this as an operations fast walk through the public part of the museum. Then we can look behind the doors, and then let's take an overview of governance, followed by your questions and some answers. But as I tell staff, the best answer to most questions is, I don't know, I'll find out. And you may get that, and then we will endeavor to find out. Other words from my past to live by include things like leave your dead on the battlefield, and work hard, play hard, and rest when you're dead. But that's not relevant here. That was more a trading life. So let's get started. The first, where did we go? Where did our friend go? Somehow I've lost the there we are. Okay. Yeah, Ambassador Sorensen came to visit on extremely short notice, November 25th. He brought his family to the museum. They also stopped at the windmill. They were doing a rapid fire Midwestern tour, but we had a wonderful visit. Somehow managed to get a tour, some Lego play, small bro, all fit in about an hour and a half. The best part of that, I think, was even though he is policy driven, he is willing to advocate on our behalf culturally. So we'll see what dividend that provides. But it was a very nice visit, and the staff on short notice and on a quick turn took. This is not his partner. This is a Danish exchange student who has been in the Elkhorn area and came in to visit. I've got these in the wrong order. I apologize. This sort of fell out of the blue, not the activity, but the coverage. So we were in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Our board member, Mary Ellen Johnson, has recruited a number of volunteers, some of whom are here visiting with us now, to cover our Lego table at the Minneapolis Symphony. And the concert was reviewed in the Journal, and somehow they managed to include Museum of Danish America. I thought that was a great catch on our part. Talking about exhibits here, ceramics, Danish ceramics is closing April 20th. We've learned a couple of things from that. It was a tremendous undertaking, both for the curatorial staff and I think exercising the flex that the museum has. So we ended up being given some remarkable pieces by the Smithsonian, who were deaccessioning, some from the New Carlsberg Foundation in Denmark. They're incredible pieces. I think one thing that we have learned that an extended conversation with both collector and consultant Kevin Henry, who's also on this call, yielded is that Danish ceramics are much more popular in Denmark right now than they are in the U.S. The U.S. collector appreciable market has not evolved in the same way and at the same pace. So while some manufacturers are having their moment right now, like Paulshus in Denmark, who we featured in this exhibit, they have not caught on here yet, and it's a shame because I think it's a really beautiful, well-proportioned but underappreciated exhibit. In any case, that's closing the 20th of April. We opened a history of Danish jazz, December 19th. The two posters here were gifts from the artist Per Arnaldi to the Danish home in Croton, and then basically accession brought to the museum when we closed the home there a few years ago. It's a wonderful exhibit. It has a soundtrack of 5 different clips that Adam Biersted sourced from Denmark, from here, I think also from Holland. Very evocative, talking about, and if you appreciate jazz, this is a wonderful snapshot. I happen to be a big fan, so it fit lovely in a great way. Downstairs, we're opening Wunderkammer, which is sort of the staff's cabinet of curiosities. That starts February 20th. We were all invited to choose five artifacts from the collection and describe what they mean to us and why. And that's been a couple of months and it's currently being put together, and we'll open the door on that shortly. In April, the Heartland Danes from Des Moines and also Marcia Janti's Wisconsin Sister and Mr. Sisterhood, sorry, will be trekking here. They're going to use the museum at least as a partial base of operations for themselves. And I really thank Marcia and Marilyn Gift out of Des Moines for both thinking of us and putting us to work. It's a great match. This exhibit has had tremendous traction, both engaging in terms of what we bring in to include in it, but also enthusiasm from board and former board members for supporting it. This is Vikingmania, which has been a study of Adam Bierstad, our Albert Ravenholt curator of Danish American culture for some time, I think academically as well as part of his career. So this really hit the sweet spot. It will open up in the upstairs in the Cramey Gallery after we have shut down and sent off the ceramics collection. It's broad-reaching, broad-ranging, and the artifacts have started to come in. Some out of our collection, but many out of, let's just say, unusual references to the Viking ethos in America. I think you'll enjoy that. We have found good traction for this. Other parties interested in taking it on after we remove it from the site. So this may be around North America for a while. I hope so. In fall of 2027, in large part, the enthusiasm and material donations, the artifact donations of Dee Dee Bartlett, a donor from New Canaan, Connecticut. We're going to have a history on the Danish West Indian history. I added this slide because this is from 1987, the original floor plan for the museum. And if you look about halfway down the right side, in addition to Danes in Canada, it's probably the last time the museum featured the Virgin Islands in any material way. So this will be a nice stretch. Dee Dee, who pays close attention and has authored 2 books on the topic, feels that this is the first time this will be an exhibit in North America on the Danish history in the West Indies, including furniture from her family and some other artifacts. Well, okay. I don't know how you can beat Oscar Peterson and knee hop. The fellow looking over OP's shoulder here is, well, maybe the best acoustic jazz bassist ever. In fact, Peterson said of him when he died, he said he didn't play the bass, he was the bass. Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen and Oscar Peterson, the Canadian pianist, played together for years. And I mention them because we've come up with an interesting model. This jazz webinar on January 31st is going to be an informal conversation between Adam, our Ravenholt curator of Danish American culture, and Henrik Wolsgaard Iversen, who's a jazz historian, an author, and a producer in Denmark. And Henrik came to us indirectly through the Danish Radio National Girls Choir, and a jazz pianist in Denmark, a personal friend, Ola Koch Hansen, who demurred. He said he knew what he played, but he didn't really know the history, and he strongly recommended Henrik, who was willing to sit down via Zoom for this webinar. I strongly encourage you, if you have an interest in Danish, music and history, that's well worth a listen then. This is a topic we're going to revisit. But Martina Lind Krebs is an authoress, wrote The Monument, Images of Greenland and Denmark Through 100 Years. And I say we're going to revisit it because I think it's also relevant to what's going on currently. Her talk will be about the book, about 100 years of history between Denmark and Greenland, and I'm sure it cannot fail but to touch on what's going on currently with the United States. So that talk is scheduled for March 28th. We need to thank Erik, one of our Danish board members, for searching out Martine and also for partly sponsoring it. And this has become an interesting model. We have a number of board and former board members and the sisterhoods who have stepped forward and are willing to sponsor or partially sponsor or share sponsorship of these webinars, to the point that we're able to complement either exhibits that are on site or other topics of general interest. So for instance, we disassembled the Greenland exhibit that was down at the GEC, down at the Genealogical Center prior to Julefest. But we had talked about arranging this discussion and then subsequently found her. And then, of course, well, what's going on currently. So we'll see what the state of the state is, but we're looking forward to Martine's talk again, March 28th. And my point is that we actually have funding now for the next couple of webinars in place. And the model that has worked so successfully is that people who even either have an interest in the topic or are interested in sponsoring a number of things can sponsor halves of different ones. And so we're two talks ahead now. I would encourage anybody who would like a modest support of the museum. This is an intriguing possibility, and just talk to Deb if you have an interest, and we'll either find the topic for you or put you on the short list. One of the things we had discussed here was how to increase foot traffic here at the museum. And one idea that came up is let's be open one evening a week to see if people who, like our employees, have to work during the day, if we could encourage them to come to the museum if we're open in non-traditional hours. So Thursday nights, we're now open until 8 o'clock. And the first Thursday was this past Thursday. And we invited local business leaders to come up and just enjoy the museum. We had good turnout. We had 25 or so people. And of course, because they all know one another, conversation was pretty straightforward. Small bro went pretty quickly. We offered, I think, wine, beer, and aquavit, but it was a very pleasant evening from about 5 o'clock to 7:30, 7:45. And as we parted, the windmill said he might like to copy the idea, said, no copyright, it's yours. Let's encourage this kind of interaction and get people to think that the museum, get people to understand that the museum wants to be a part of the community. So I think it's a good step forward. Why is he here? We did install a prairie cam, and if you're old enough to remember CBS's Sunday morning with Charles Kuralt, they always closed with a live cam out of Dannebrog, Nebraska, which happened to be my family's immigration town. But I think it was Roger Welch's influence probably. Anyway, our prairie cam is up and live. It will certainly be more interesting come spring and fall when things are really starting to flourish. But it's there. It's ready to go. We also instituted a binocular loan program. So this was really the genesis of this was the board now has what we call a blue sky committee, so that if an idea comes in that's non-traditional or not obviously suited to the museum's mission, the board now has a vehicle with which to take a look at it, right? And see if it somehow fits, if we can sort of fit the round peg in the square hole. And Mike Kohler, one of our board members from Wisconsin, had the idea of making this, a bird-centric area. So it didn't quite fit that way yet, but we do have a binocular loan program now at the front desk. Come and borrow, sign out a pair of binoculars. I've maintained a relationship with Sawmill River Audubon back in Westchester County. I'm still their president, and they've donated a half a dozen, bird guides so that somebody can come in, take the guide, take the binoculars, and look around the prairie, look around the rest of the property. The only thing I scare up this time of year, other than vultures, are the ring-necked pheasants, and they are in abundance. It's been a good year for them so far. I think it's also a good time to thank Amelia Jewell, our media manager, for the wonderful blogs and promotional pushes that she's giving each of our efforts. MoDA magazine, at the subtle urging of longtime and heavily invested museum member John Mark Nielsen, we were encouraged to remember our roots, right, as a voice of the Danish immigrant experience. So I am very pleased that Pastor Julie Slok of the Danish Seamen's Church in Brooklyn and her husband Torsten Slok, partner and chief economist at Apollo Global Management, will be Amelia's immigrant profile in our spring MoDA magazine. Julie has the church's responsibility up and down the East Coast, and I think as far as Chicago. Torsten, you may recognize from any one of a number of financial news shows. I think he's the preeminent economist in the United States right now. His read on inflation and market sentiment has been dead on. They're both very interesting to listen to. They lead very independent and very Danish lives in Brooklyn, which used to be a Danish stronghold. But you know, as we assimilated and the immigration numbers dropped off the face of the earth, the church is up in Brooklyn Heights, which has its own very unique character, but not Danish. In any case, they will be the immigrant profile in the spring MoDA magazine. This issue is also going to profile the Rasmussen Group's rebranding of Viking aggregates and board member Lynette Rasmussen and her family. So it's already the makings of a good issue. We're already working on it, and I would encourage you to pay special attention to it when it comes out. An early initiative of my more active participation here in the museum was, the realization that foot traffic is not heavy. We always sort of talk about a number of 8,000, but in fact, the mean over the last 4 years here post-COVID has been about 5,100 visitors a year to the museum proper. That's down roughly 25% from pre-COVID numbers. So one way to get people to appreciate the work that we do is to take it on the road. And we're doing it in a couple of different ways. It's dual-pronged. We're developing touring hybrid versions of our permanent collection items, so artifacts from the permanent collection, and some of our historic traveling exhibits. Here I'm showing you the Hygge exhibit from a few years ago, and I'm sure you are all somewhat familiar with the concept of skull and Scandinavian spirits. Adam and Anna Thomas, our educator, are busy figuring out ways that we can take these on the road and connect up destinations, but to bring our expertise and knowledge to the audiences to encourage them to think about coming to the museum. That's well underway in development. The local version of that, and when I say local, I really mean local and regional, so perhaps extending as far as Omaha and Des Moines, but certainly in the local school districts. We've developed a traveling trunk program. There are currently 4 trunks. They are now mostly being funded by donors, but the topics include World War II, immigration, H.C. Andersen, and the Prairie. And those have some traction already. We're also taking our program into, for instance, next week, it would have been this week, it'll be next week, into Salem, the nursing home here in town that also has assisted living, both to increase just eyeballs on our product, but also make it more available in inclement weather. Oops, sorry. One thing I didn't talk about, but that we actually started with, the first step was to rearrange the offices. And while it doesn't sound significant, right placing people can make a tremendous difference. So we moved the executive director back to the main floor. I'm in what historically was the director's office. Henry Olson, who was in this office, moved next door. Next door, which was facilities, is now up in the balcony. And the 2 development officers who were in the balcony, having sort of public-private conversations and having to whisper, are now down in the office next to the accountant. So That's a very appropriate set. They need to be able to communicate easily, and they're where they should be. The educator has moved up from the GEC and is seated next to communications. And then our new intern, Hannah Kidder, is safely tucked in the collections department. Okay, that's pretty much what's going on out the front door and in the building. I'd like to take you now behind the scenes and talk about what we're doing to support all of this. The new phone system actually went in today. Tim Palmer had done some rewiring evenings to not disrupt the workday, and then the local phone company came in, installed the new phones, and we've had tutorials from Henry on how to use them. So excuse the hiccups, but I think it definitely will be less expensive. It should be more efficient. Your call should still be answered within 3 rings, and I think we'll be happy with it. We also installed a new security system down at the GEC at the Genealogical Center. You shouldn't notice any change from that. But here's the piece that excites me, one among many. Anybody who took Statistics 101 has been told that numbers tell the story, right? But numbers can tell lots of different stories. And they can also be used equally importantly to not tell certain stories. So in that case, having worked at AIG, I always think of Enron and AIG and maybe your local volunteer fire department where the treasurer was embezzling funds, right? Lack of knowledge is as dangerous as having the knowledge and misusing it. So we're working hard to improve our data so that we can know and tell the full story. For instance, attendance is concerning. It's down 25% post-COVID, as I mentioned, from an annual average of 6,900 unique visitors to 5,150. On the other hand, the membership drop of 20% since last year, while it's concerning, it tells a different story. You have to take into account that last year included a significant effort, an almost 20% increase through gift memberships. And the idea there was to see if giving gift memberships would then yield recurring membership engagement. And while we found it has not particularly, if we thought we had lost 20% in a 1 year-over-year basis, that's a real concern. And so less concerned about that, but equally eager to find another way to stabilize and increase membership. As a former finance guy, getting a good statement of functional expenses points directly to areas of concern, for instance, endowment withdrawals, right? Well, we're within 5% in the IRS's best practice guidelines. Anything that you're not leaving in the endowment and reinvesting, of course, is not then compounding for years going forward. So there is a real cost to financing your year-over-year operations by expending some part of your endowment. Donors to the endowment may feel good that the endowment is being used for the cause, but I'm a firm believer in keeping your powder dry. Another concern that has fallen out of looking at the numbers carefully is that 35% of our revenues are bequests, right? So we always have this as long as I've been involved, the axiom has sort of been we rely on investment income and dying Danish farmers. Sort of cynical, but also, verily true. We can now address that both as the executive director, as a staff, and as the board to figure out what's an appropriate threshold amount to be spending. Not just endowment expense, but as what you can anticipate to have for operational expenditures. Yeah, near and dear to my number crunching heart, we are finally very close to a functional cash flow forecasting state so that we'll actually know when we have to be hyper concerned about free cash flow. Some historical perspective, the last 8 years have been extraordinarily different for this museum's lifetime. We always had a healthy balance sheet, which has only grown, but we always were concerned about free cash flow because our annual expenses certainly outstrip our annual revenues. And it was always, how do we cover this? We now have a really good idea of an annualized cash flow. And we'll be using that in the next couple of weeks with staff. So data sets will be useful for budgeting and for day-to-day operations. Honestly, through little to no fault of the staffs, they, for the most part, have not known how their departments are performing financially. And in most cases, don't know what the criteria for measuring performance is. So with meaningful revenue and expense metrics, and meaningful year-to-year comparisons and meaningful annualized forecasting processes, we'll be able to sit down as a staff, and the financial literacy will help inform decision-making going forward. A good example, development was very happy on December 31st to know that they were 44% ahead of the year before's end-of-year appeal, right? 2 days ago that they were only 25% ahead, but they could also appreciate that as it's tailing down, that's going to stabilize. And it's still a very good place to be on a higher number than they would have had 2 weeks earlier. I think that's all I want to say about finance. A personnel discussion here, right? And there's a lot to talk about. Would begin with Tova's resignation October 14th. Clearly stated, and I quote, she said, "For the sake of my personal life, I'm pursuing opportunities that allow me to be closer to my family." So at the Elkhorn board meeting, October 16th to 18th, the board accepted her resignation and my offer to serve as interim executive director. We subsequently elected Philip Lund of Portland to replace me as the board president, and I serve now as vice president. I've been in Elkhorn since. Committed to this as long as it takes, and as long as my nuclear family in suburban New York City put up with my absence. And the only one person who has really put up a squawk is this one. This is Daisy Lopez, our granddaughter. And yeah, a great reason for getting back when I can. The rest of the personnel news here. Archivist and Genealogical Center manager Erik Mortensen resigned effective December 30th. Therefore, the reason for bringing Anna Thomas, the educator, up from the GEC to staff with the rest of the group. Cheyenne Nordquist went out on maternity leave in December. One of our front desk team was hit by a car in Des Moines in December. And our 2 Danish interns, Natalie Nielsen and Nick Preist, finished their tours and went back to Denmark. On the other side, January 5th, Terry Johnson rejoined us. And Terry is working in development with Deb Monday through Wednesday. So give her a call and say, hey, and glad to see you back. So after 2 to 3 years of high turnover, culminating with a leadership departure, right? Let's run right out and hire an executive director. To try and fill a job that's unfillable. The job description here dates back to when the ED was the chief cook and bottle washer. And we don't want to do this more than once. And we can't really advertise until we know what we need. Mm-hmm. I expect a pretty complete picture in time for the February 23rd to 25th board meeting in Solvang. And so you can fairly ask, what more will we know then than we know now? And to that purpose, from July forward, the museum has employed HRE Consulting out of West Des Moines. And I noticed that Melissa McCoy, the principal of HRE, is on the call with us now. But Melissa has worked intensively with the staff and with management to put in place long absent policies and procedures that are necessary to run a business of any kind. We've already implemented many changes, and we're in the final stages of a new employee handbook that runs to 70 pages. In December, Melissa engaged with board member Tanya Knudsen-Robson to provide the staff professional development sessions. They subsequently liaised with Angela Stamford, principal of Advanced Museum Services Consulting, and well known to many of you as MoDA's former registrar. The museum has contracted with AMS to do an overall staff needs assessment, which will deeply inform the ED hiring process. All of that has led us to the governance door and the February board meeting. New board member Esther Bates, who you may have known as the past director of the Elverhoy Museum, has been crucially helpful getting this meeting arranged. She was working on it during our October meeting. And the board, I can say, has a lot to discuss. It's a heavy lift, but it's a very capable board. And I'm just going to go through the highlights of what are going to be addressed, and keep in mind sort of that Girl Scout motto that we need to use resources wisely, right? So highest on my personal to-do list is how do we best utilize the conundrum that is and has been the Genealogy and Education Resource Center. It's a handsome building, a donation from a former board member, Dennis Andersen, that's down on Main Street. So it gives us another presence here in town. But Main Street in Elkhorn is not what it was 15 or 20 years ago, and certainly not what it was in 1984. So there's a lot of work to do there. We had 12 unique visitors in November at the GEC, aside from the people who came in for Yule Fest. When briefly engaged to conduct genealogical research, we can't charge enough to cover the hourly cost of the researcher. This is a field that has largely gone digital, so those engagements are pretty rare to begin with. And most genealogy is digital and transportable, so the expertise can walk out the door. And the question is, one, you know, how much time do you spend developing? How much time do you spend educating? How much time do you spend researching? So a current idea that has evolved both with local genealogists and with our staff is maybe Danish genealogical education is the fit for us, not doing the research ourselves, right? In other words, show somebody how to make a belt, but don't make it for them. For now, the center is open by appointment, but it's a great spacious area. We have a lot of primary resources that people should be willing and need to use, and we have to figure out the efficient way to do it, because having a full-time employee waiting for the door to open is an old way of doing it, and I think we can figure out a more effective way. That's one topic. AAM re-accreditation. So it's been 10 years, believe it or not, since the museum was accredited. The principals involved in that are gone, although the aforementioned Ms. Stamford championed the process, and I assume that she will be a resource for us. Our deadline is November to submit the re-accreditation materials. They are not as stringent as the original process was, but they will be carefully scrutinized, and we do have a checklist of things that we need to address. So we'll figure out the attack plan for that and get right to it after the February meeting. A part of that, an integral part of that, though, also an important part for the board, is our strategic plan, which is currently a 3-year plan. The current plan finishes up the end of 2026. It fortunately is a really flexible, measurable plan that was delivered almost intact by Dia Nagaraj, a former employee. I assume, will begin to work on that in February. Should have it in place to vote to approve at the October board meeting here in Elkhorn. A large preoccupation for the board, the staff, and the community volunteers has been the master plan. Phase 1 is completed. We had a post-completion review with Brett Seelman, who led the plan of Seelman Landscape Architecture, I think on December 3rd of this year. It's a multi-level assessment. It includes some conclusions, some suggestions, some recommendations. It's broad-ranging in scope, in cost, in the vision for the museum and for Elkhorn, honestly. The most discussed and controversial part of it was the idea of a Dambo troll here on the site. We had a meeting scheduled this morning, actually, with Dambo that they canceled for illness. We'll do it instead next week. But there is an ad hoc committee, a board ad hoc committee in place. Thank you to John Bornhoft, community member and husband of board member Margie, who agreed to chair that committee as of day before yesterday. And also thank you to Joy Geisha, who had been the initial board chair. I do want to take a second. I'd be remiss to not note the loss to both the Danish Villages community and to the museum in particular with the deaths of Joy's mother, Rosa Clemens, and Kimbleton fixture Annette Andersen, both of whom were longtime dedicated volunteers to the museum. We also lost former board member Dorothy Feisel and Howard Sorensen. There are probably others I should mention, but am not aware of. Significant losses to the community and to the museum. Another topic that will certainly be addressed there in the open session at the board meeting, the curatorial issue of ceramics, right? Where are we? We've had invigorating and long-term conversations with American collectors. We had a really interesting discussion with collector and consultant Kevin Henry, who's here on the call with us today, about what's the museum's role, what's our depth of engagement for being the largest public collection of Danish ceramics in the U.S. That certainly was a vision of Tova's. It's not clear right now where it fits in our mission statement. That's always been gritty. But we have raised expectations, and we've engaged at a fairly high level with serious collectors who would like to know where we would like to go, and I think would also like to help inform us in that discussion as well, and we're open to that, right? Another topic, again, back to Greenland, is what kind of a platform does the museum have for advocacy? There are things that we are specifically excluded from advocating for and supporting without jeopardizing our 501c3, right, from the federal government. There are also certainly things in Iowa, as there are every state, that regulate charities in things that you can and cannot do. You cannot, for instance, donate to organizations that can campaign or on behalf of specific politicians, right? Or advocate for legislation that is outside the scope of your charitable purpose, right? So it's not as complicated as it sounds, but there can be immediate and severe repercussions if you step out of bounds. On the other hand, I do think, like many Danish American organizations, we're both have a voice, and we are expected to use our voice, right, to advocate on behalf of Danish American relations. So I'm sure that'll be a topic. Before I open this to questions, I'd like to let's all thank the museum community, beginning with yourselves, for your interest, because obviously without you, without us, this is just not a presence. I'd like to thank the past and the present board, whose time and treasure are critical in making this possible. I'd like to thank the staff, who are an integral part of the present and future of the museum. And I need to thank my family, for whom the tolerance for this latest Danish-centric adventure of mine, it makes it possible for me to stay here in the sandbox. So let me open this to questions. Although I'm going to ask the first question, right, holding the floor. The first question is, Andersen, I hear the blah, 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 but why are you taking so long with this search process, right? And the answer is, this is a discovery. It's a definition of the job. It's a composition of the job. There's a full-time managerial position here. There's also the absolute need to have somebody representing development nationwide for a nationwide museum. And we know that's not a 1.0, that's a 1.5 or more of a job, right? And we need to figure out how to make that work. It's the composition of the job. It's sharing those ideas so that you have a consensus with staff, with board, with community members of what that should be before you then go looking. It's a refinement process, and then it's call it acquisition, right, when you find the right person. So we're on the first step. It's the biggest step by far, defining it well. But there's a huge incentive to get it right the first time. It's complicated by our location, by a lack of a repository of institutional knowledge, and by a human resources overhaul that's 7 months in the making now. So you need to know, from my perspective, there's no ulterior motive. Board members are not compensated. And so I'm looking forward to a positive outcome on this, the right outcome for all of us. And the door is open, right? So we'll figure it out together. Let's open it to questions. I know that's a lot of talk, that's a lot of listening, but I think let's see if we can answer what people want to know.
Erik, could you make the whole screen be the people that are attending so we can see everybody?
Maybe I'm going to close my share
Yeah.
and Deb can take over.
Okay,
There we
you
go. Thank you.
Erik.
Good, good, good,
Thank
good.
you.
You bet. Anybody want to lead out? Make sure you unmute yourself if you've got a question.
Hi,
This is
Erik. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is
Lori.
Randy Brugart. Erik,
Oh,
I
Randy.
applaud
Yeah,
you
yeah.
for your heroic efforts to jump in and take this position for as long as necessary. So I think it's great that you're doing it. It shows your love of your heritage, your museum, and your friends you've developed over the years.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Randy. This group captivated me 15 years ago when I first served on the board, and I described the staff back then as 9 all-stars with absolutely no bench. And things have certainly evolved. The job market has changed. The museum world has changed. We have the same supporting group and we have the same dedication from the staff. They deserve what we can give. They deserve what we can give them. And we deserve the dividend that comes back. So I appreciate it. I think we all feel the same way. I'm just glad that I had the opportunity afforded by COVID shutting down the Danish home. But yeah, and Eva's patience. Anyone else?
Yeah, Erik, have you had what sort of press or public queries has the museum had about the issue between the United States and Greenland?
I'm not going to go back because I will probably gum up the works. In getting back to the slide that I wanted to share, there have been a couple of direct inquiries, David. One from one of our supporters that Deb shared with me today. The other, Deb, you can refresh my memory. There was another that may have come in instead to Amelia. But I thought Amelia, and I'll make sure we circulate it. Amelia's response, which she posted on Facebook, wasn't directly directed to the Greenland issue, but I thought was a really positive comment about the importance of community, right? It was related to our bringing people in Thursday night from the local business community and how important community is to the strength of building community is for just that. So we've heard very little directly. In fact, less than I would have thought, honestly. And I can't say that I've gotten much non-museum feedback from here in town. Interestingly, and I'll share this because it surprised me, one of the comments we had from somebody we've been trying to connect with was they were glad that we were reaching out to non-Danes in Elkhorn. I didn't know that there was this barrier, this wall. So if we're breaking down something by tripping over it, that's fine. That works. Anyone else?
Yeah, Erik, I have a question about the campus master plan.
Sure.
What do you envision the process will be for moving that forward, and specifically with respect to community involvement?
Great question, Erik. So at the last board meeting, we constituted a master plan. It's the board ad hoc committee, but that's only because it sits at the board level, right? And I think it's equally made up of staff, board, and community members. I know of 3 community members. I know Lisa Riggs. I know John Bornhoft. And I'm going to be embarrassed. Mindy Brown, pardon me, right, are involved. I think we leave the direction in that group's hands. There's a lot in it, and people are engaged with that at every level from let's think big to let's think really small. An engaging thing about that plan, there are things that are eminently doable with almost no budget. That to me kind of makes sense, right? For instance, can we open sightlines off the bro room, the dining room there, so that we can see the prairie, low cost? Can we expand that patio at which we spent at the end of the last board meeting? Could we expand that by 2 or 3x? It's got to be pretty low cost. On the other hand, a building addition at $8 to $12 million, that's big. That's big thinking, right? It takes a different kind of capital campaign than the others. I would love for that committee to come back with a list of recommendations of a feasibility study, right? And talk to the board about that. I'm really glad that the 3 people who volunteered out of the community, one represents very long time community service and activity, and is an original board member of the museum. One has been a board member a couple of times over and is actively involved still in a number of ways, and a sponsor of the Prairie. And the third is right here with us, who was willing to step forward and take on chairmanship of the committee. So I think we have the right mix. Is that a fair answer, Erik? Thank you.
Erik?
Yes. Hey, Kevin.
This is Kevin, and you've sort of already posed the question, but if you would give me a minute or two just to talk about the ceramics initiative of the museum to date, I would appreciate that. Is that all right?
Yeah. Yes. If you can keep it a minute or two, that'd be great.
And introduce myself. I'm new to the museum. I've been a member only for about 3 years, and my engagement came when Tova and Dia reached out to me for help in putting together the ceramics exhibition. And I just say a few things. One, for those of you who haven't seen it, I would encourage you to take in the exhibition, but also to go down into the visual storage area of the museum, because the museum has actually acquired a substantial number of very high quality examples of Danish ceramic arts. And, the goal, that Tova said at the beginning was to really become the foremost repository for Danish ceramics in the US. And the only other thing I would say is that's totally up to the board and the leadership of the museum if you want to pursue that. But I want you to know that if you do decide to do that, I'm willing to step up, to donate pieces from my collection, to continue to volunteer my time, to work with other board members and donors that might be interested, to kind of really chart out what it would look like for the museum to be the go-to place in the US for Danish ceramics, whether that be entirely housed, in Elkhorn, or whether that also be in partnership with other museums or other institutions in the US, that might be in larger, metropolitan areas. There is a tremendous interest in Danish ceramics in the world today. I think, Erik, you might have undersold the interest in the US, but it is true that right now in Denmark, it's even stronger. The museum has the most important collection of Pelsus ceramics in the US, certainly. And there's going to be the first major museum retrospective in Denmark at one of the most important Danish museums. And there are 2 or 3 other exhibitions coming up in Denmark just this year, covering workshops and artists represented in your collection. So there are lots of opportunities for partnership that MoDA could have with museums, collectors, artists in Denmark to also build that more as a collaborative undertaking. So I'll stop there, but anyone who's interested in pursuing that, or if the board decides to put together a group to look into that, I'd happily volunteer my time.
That's great. Thank you for your input, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Erik, I just have to respond to that a little bit. This is Carol Svensson, and I was on the board a few years ago. and worked with the strategic planning committee. But I've always been a little bit skeptical of whether there is an audience amongst the people that are interested in Danish history and immigrant culture, and well, not just immigrant, but culture, Danish culture, in specifically in ceramics. And so I think we need to be very cautious in identifying whether we really have an audience that would be attracted to the museum because of a collection of Danish ceramics. I'm all for exhibits of ceramics. I think there's a lot of positive outcome from that. But a permanent collection of ceramics, I just am skeptical of whether there will be the buy-in, the interest to that on the part of American people who are interested in Denmark.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. 2 points of view. It's why we'll discuss it. Yeah, we'll talk it over and develop it. Thank you. Anyone
Erik,
else?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Ken Paulson, your newest
Hey, Ken.
member. I've been very intrigued with what's been given out by you today, and I think my short period of time with the museum board has been very exciting, to say the least. I think the things that you are doing are precursors to really creating an environment that is receptive of a new director of high caliber that can move this museum, MoDA, forward. And I think the good part of it is you're working on the things that really need to be done. The HR situation, making the employees more of a cohesive group that works and is knowledgeable about what they are supposed to do in the areas of their responsibility. The financial aspect, the accounting, some of the things that you've told us about have been kind of, awing, to say the least, to me. But I think you are doing the right thing, and I hope that the board members and the people participating here, as well as staff, are understanding and are in cooperation with what you are looking at doing and are doing. And I congratulate you for that. I understand that it's a hard time to be away from grandkids. They're kind of the only thing that us old folks really got. And I'm not that old. But again, I just want to say, in my short period of time with you, the board, I've been very enthralled, and especially enthralled with what you are doing. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Ken. The board overall has been extremely supportive, as have been former board members who, have ridden this horse. So yeah, thank you, all of you, for that. Yeah. Anyone else?
I know that we're running a little bit late here, but I'd just like, for future perspective, if you could talk very briefly about the relationship between the Genealogy Center and the museum, how you feel those reinforce each other in terms of the mission, and what a path forward might be.
What an interesting question, Lori. And I say that because I've been trying to figure out why the cultures between, it's all part of the same organization, right? It's literally separated by, I don't know, a quarter of a mile through the prairie, something like that. The GEC had probably only through geography, as sort of an isolationist perspective. The volunteers at the GEC really only volunteer down at the GEC. And the staff that was down there rarely came up, but I also think part of it was that the director rarely went down there. So I think what we turn it into, right? It morphed from genealogy to genealogy and education together. But was it being used? It was being used somewhat for the education as opposed to a storage area for the education materials. It's our presence on Main Street. It needs to be vibrant. It needs to be representative of what we're doing up here. And also when we figure out what we should look like in the genealogical world, It needs to represent that well without, I think there's, I have not thought through this as a standalone, but I think it's really important if you're going to have a presence, especially on a street that should be active, that somebody walks in the door, that it's not so quiet it could be closed, right? There needs to be activity. And if that means you have a variety of things, or you have things that are attracting other people, it could be that we have a non-traditional exhibit down there that will also bring in people interested in the museum, not just in genealogy. So as I said, right now we are open by appointment, but that's really only until we figure out what to do and how to do it. We can't walk away from genealogy. We do have some first-person resources available nowhere else. We also will be having a meeting Monday with Danish American Archive and Library, DAL in Blair, and with Grandview University. There are 3 organizations within 120 miles of one another, all collecting Danish archives. There has to be a better way to do it. I've listened to the arguments from each party, and each of us have not a different motivation, but different priorities. And at the end of the day, you know, we're all trying to tell the Danish immigrant story through the paperwork. We'll sort it out. There are smart people in each place, and the economies of scale, right? And we don't need 3 full sets of the Bean. We'll get there. It's not a complete answer because I don't have one. This is one I would put Lori on the list of, I don't know, I'll find out. And when I find out, you'll find out.
Thank you so much. That sounds wonderful.
Okay.
A question, Erik. This is John Bornhoft. And to answer Erik Littlehigh's question, you know, Brett Seelman came and did a brown bag lunch and got the community involved for their input, and then got the board involved. And I think that's our goal. You really hit on the high points of what we can afford and get a feasibility study. And my second comment would be, would it be possible to take that Greenland exhibit that was done at the Genealogy Center and bring it up to the, you know, front room of the museum when you walk in, and get some traffic? You know, there's a huge interest in that, and I think the public of Elkhorn and Kimballton and the surrounding area might be interested in coming and looking at that.
That's really interesting. I'll talk to Adam tomorrow morning, because it was disassembled to set up the pop-up shop for the design store in the days before Yule Fest. So I'm sure the component pieces are around. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And here you've taken me outside of my museum science comfort zone, which is, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Hi, this is Deb, and I wanted to add one thing, and I don't know if all of you would know this, but with Erik being here, as far as I understand, there is no salary. He's here with no compensation. It's here on his own behalf for all of us. So I think that's amazing.
Well, that's the way the board works, right? The bylaws, you don't compensate board members, and as long as, yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Erik.